What I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down the very basic structure of the kettlebell swing into the drills that we use to teach the movement. So first thing really is why the kettlebell swing? Well, the main reason is because we use it a lot in our workouts. When it comes to working out at home, when it comes to working out in a limited space with limited kit, the kettlebell's pretty much the king, okay? It's great for conditioning, it's great for fitness, it's great for strength work, it's amazing for fat loss. It's just a really good piece of kit, and with that one piece of kit you can do a whole bunch of different moves. So you've got the kettlebell swing, which we're going to go through today, the kettlebell clean, the squat, the press, the snatch, and a lot of other bits and pieces, hey. So just with access to that one piece of kit and having the swing as the foundation of all those other movements, you've got almost unlimited capacity in terms of training. So the kettlebell swing itself is the foundation of all kettlebell work. Kettlebell work is just brilliant, like I said, for conditioning. It's really good for keeping a healthy back, strong glutes, super fit, burning loads of fat. So why not get really good at the kettlebell swing? And then obviously when we do the sessions and we pull out the kettlebell swing as part of that session, you're going to be able to do it safely in the knowledge that you're doing it really well. You're getting the most out of every rep that you do, and you're going to do it hopefully in a way that doesn't give you a sore back or pull the skin off your hands, which sometimes also happens. All right, so kettlebell swing, we're going to break this down. Oh God. Right, what we're going to break it down into is we're going to break this down into the hip drill, because the kettlebell swing is essentially a backward and forward movement of the hips. It's not a down and up movement of the legs. It's not an up and down movement of the arms. It's a forwards or backwards and forwards movement of the hips. So we're going to look at the hip drill to get those hips moving, okay? There are lots of other things that I'm not going to include in the video, but I know, and Dan knows, as just great little hints and tips. So you can hit us up with questions, and we might bring some of those out as well. But we're going to go into the hip drill, the hip movement and the wall drill as the first thing. Second thing we're going to go into is the foot position. So basically where you stick your feet. How the top position should be, that when you complete the kettlebell swing, what you should look like, and how to use breathing correctly and what the correct rhythm of the swing is. So that's all the second section, okay? The third section is how to do a good kettlebell deadlift, and how to do a hike and park. The hike is basically how you correctly, the hike is how you correctly start a set of swings. If you are commenting live, A, it's great to see you. B, I think there's a bit of a delay. So if I take ages to respond to a comment or question, it's just because I don't always come up straight away when I'm on live. So we're going to do the deadlift and the hike and park as the third part. And then we're going to look at two-handed swing, one-handed swing, and how to switch hands during a set of one-handed swings. So that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover all that now. I may or may not have Brad, my flatmate, coming in and out behind me, but try not to let that distract you. It will definitely distract me, but I'll do my best to minimize that as well. All right, so the first thing we're going to do then is, the first thing I'm going to do is actually show you a fucking kettlebell swing, because sometimes you don't even know how good it looks when it's done properly. So here I am. Let's have a look. So I've got a 16 kg kettlebell here, which according to Russian standards is the beginning weight for any man. So if you have a penis, this is what you start with, okay? There are some exceptions, but this is, if you're a Russian, this is what you'll be starting with, and this is what they do on all the certifications. So this is a fairly light kettlebell, okay? Kettlebell swing then. Don't know how far back I'm going to have to get for you to be able to see the kettlebell when I do this. That'll do, won't it? I imagine that you can still hear my voice. So kettlebell swing, going to set the feet, going to set the hips, going to get back into that position, down, hands on, tilt back, hike, swing, hike, swing. And that's all it is, hike, swing. It's just hike and swing, hike and swing, okay? And putting it down nice and neatly. So if we were going to do that sideways on, probably get to about there. That's really going to be okay without smashing the front wheel off my bike. So plant the feet, go through, man, it's cool. Plant the feet, get the hips back, hike the bell, hike, swing, hike, swing, back, swing. Okay? So that's what it's going to look like, hopefully, once you've practiced all these drills and become great at the swing. One of the things you'll get that will probably frustrate you when you first actually start swinging the kettlebell is people tend to swing the kettlebell up to here, and then they'll start to move the hips back before the hands come down. That's the number one issue that we have. So from the beginning, whenever we're moving the kettlebell or even pretending to move the kettlebell, I want you to get used to the fact that it goes hips first, then arms go up, then arms come down, and then it's hips again, okay? And note that straight line from the top of my hips up to my shoulder, so I'm not making a scared cat shape, okay? So that's what we want the kettlebell swing to look like generally. And the way we do that is to start to learn how to move the hips properly first. So you'll hear me talking a lot about hip flexors in terms of mobility. Well, it's the hip flexors that, funnily enough, flex the hips. And hip flexion is closing that gap, like making that angle smaller. So you've got a straight, like flat 180 there. Hips go into flexion, you're bringing that to less than 45 degrees. So when you think of that with your feet planted on the floor, it's that way. But if you look at this angle here, and you bring that there, that's the same thing. So that's why we call them the hip flexors. And they are instrumental in being able to create the correct position for the back of the swing, or if you think about it, the start of the deadlift, or getting into a position for a jump squat. It's all hip flexor dominant, okay? So what we want to do is we want to learn how to use the hip flexors to pull the hips backwards instead of, and this is what a lot of people do when those hip flexors aren't really working, because you might be spending all day sitting down in this position. Those hip flexors are shortening, tightening and weakening, so you're going to have very underactive, understrength hip flexors. And when that's the case, pulling the hips back like this can actually be quite hard work. So what the body tends to do is it does that instead. It locks the hips into place and it finds all that movement through the spine instead. See how round that gets. So this is me reaching forwards and down, which is what we don't want, as opposed to hips pulling back. See how different that movement looks? That's a hip dominant movement there, pulling those hips into flexion. Whereas this is a broken hips, broken back position where those hips aren't moving, so all the movement ends up coming through the spine, okay? Nice one, Ant. Well, catch the replay, mate. Like I said at the start, I'm going to break these all down into 5 or 6 different videos, mate. Thanks for coming on. So, in order to get that hip movement working, what I want you to do is find a wall or a desk or just something that's going to stay upright and not move at all. So, I'm going to use these 2 stacked up chairs. Alright, please, alright Andy, please ignore the sophistication of my equipment or lack thereof. All you need to do is find a surface that's not going to move so that you can orient yourself towards it. You're going to stand. Perfect thing to do is just use the wall. So you're going to find that surface, stand probably 6 to 8 inches in front of it, and then you're going to pull your arse back and pull your hips back until your arse touches the surface that's just behind you, okay? You're going to start with it really easy, really close. You're not going to find really any kind of stretch there, but what that's going to get you used to doing is initiating that movement by pulling the hips backwards, okay? Once you find that quite easy, take a tiny shuffle, I'm talking an inch or 2 forward, and do that again. And you can tell already, just by moving forward by a couple of inches, I've actually got to use much more of that hip movement now, okay? So what I'm not doing here, here's 3 things I'm not doing. I'm not reaching forwards, yeah, because my hips aren't going to get any closer to the wall if I just bend forwards. I'm not squatting down, because we're not trying to squat here, okay? And I'm not arching my back, trying to get my hips to go back like that. So I'm literally sitting backwards with those hips, looking to get into the hamstrings with that movement, okay? Still feels super easy. Take another little inch forwards and do it again. Every time you move forward, stay at that position until that becomes easy, okay? Another thing we don't want is to get to about here and then fall backwards to the wall.
So if you use something that's not quite stable, I mean, you're not going to be able to fall onto it anyway, because you will go arse over tit. But a common thing we get is when you start to get to that end of range of motion, is you'll get to like here, and then you'll end up just falling back that last few inches. So don't do that. Get to the point where you're under control. Keep practicing at that level until it becomes comfortable, and then you're going to get to the point where you're going to have to move in and out a little bit, because you're going to be at that extent of your range of motion where you can still maintain control without falling backwards, but you're as far as you can. Those arms are going to start coming out in front to use as balance, as counterbalance, okay? So, where we're trying to get to with this movement is that your hips are pulled back, but your shins, so you can see my nice pale white shins there, my shins are actually still perpendicular to the ground. So it's like, imagine you're standing in concrete up to just below the knee. So those thighs, those hips are pulling backwards, and in that back position there, you should have a nice little stretch on the hamstrings. Not an intense one, but you should be able to feel that they are loaded, that you've got some elasticity in there, some springiness in those hamstrings, which is going to help fire the hips forward. Because that really is the full movement that we're looking to learn. It's just that hips back to load up the hamstrings and fire the hips forwards to squeeze the glutes, and that is pretty much the kettlebell swing movement. So that's why this drill is really fundamental, and it's the first one we learn. So take your time on that drill, stay on that drill, practice it. Ideally, if you've got a phone or iPad that you can put in selfie mode, or if you've got a mirror or whatever, you know, those old school things, mirrors that people used to use, and you're just going to practice getting to that maximal hip flexion. So pulling those hips back as far as you can without falling backwards, but taking a look in the mirror to make sure you're not dropping the chest down and being lazy, when you're not overarching the back. See that big curve in my low back here? That's going to give you a sore back really quickly, just from overusing all these muscles. So you need to spend a lot of time on this movement, keeping the ribs locked down, moving backward from the haunches into that slightly stretched hamstring position, but with your chest still proud, because you're going to be holding a load that's moving ballistically between your legs when you're in this position at the bottom of the swing. So it needs to be strong. Even though the chest is moving over significantly so that my torso is almost parallel with the floor, I've still got really good alignment through the spine, which makes that a completely safe thing to do. All right, so that we can do a social distance one-on-one, Andy, mate, if that's what you want. Just send me a message, man. We'll organise that for you, no problem at all. So that's the first drill, and I would say the most fundamental drill of all when it comes to kettlebell swings, and also a really great drill to use to practice deadlift as well, okay? What I want you to get to before you graduate yourself to the next part is to be able to just fluidly, without the wall behind you, just get into that hip flexion position and back to upright, with your feet flat on the floor, driving through the heels, squeezing the glutes tight as you get to the top. Okay? So once you can get to that, and that's nice and fluid and feels like it makes sense, then that's going to be easy. Okay? Once that's done, move on to the next part, which is what I'm going to go through now, which is